Welcome to the Mid-Melbourne graduate, the In-Study Story Master of Biostatistics webinar. My name is Peter Hartono, and I am the Student Recruitment Officer from the Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry, and Health Sciences. I will be your moderator for today. So good evening, and thank you for taking the time today to attend this webinar. So I like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodian of country throughout Australia and the connections to the lands, sea, and community. We pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to all Indigenous Australians attending our session here today. So I guess we have many audiences tuning in now, coming from many parts of Australia and overseas as well. So welcome to you all. Here today we have with us is Professor Julie Simpson, the coordinator of Master of Biostatistics from Melbourne School of Population and Global Health. We also joined by our alumni who completed their Master of Biostatistics and graduate diploma in Biostatistics. So we have Nif, who is currently working at the Peter Doherty Institute for Infections and Immunity. And we have Lizzie, currently a PhD student and also a tutor of biostatistics. And Sam, working as a researcher at the University of Melbourne. Welcome to you all. Feel free to type in your questions anytime during the webinar in the chat box, and we have our friendly staff who will be more than happy to answer your questions. I will also address some of your questions during the Q&A sessions. I also like to mention that this webinar is recorded, so you can access them afterwards. Tonight, we will start with Julie talking about Master of Biostatistics and Graduate Diploma of Biostatistics. And then our alumni who will share their personal experience and journey. We will then conclude our webinars by answering your questions in the Q&A sessions. So I guess without further ado, I would like to pass the time on to Julie to kick off with her presentations. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. Okay, if we can just move along with the slides now, thanks. Great. So yes, welcome everyone, and thank you very much for joining at the end of your day on the Tuesday. My name's Julie Simpson. I actually started my whole journey at the University of Melbourne many years ago doing a Bachelor of Science. And it's such a wonderful university that I've been delighted to be working here for the last 16 years and for the last 5 years for being the course coordinator of the Master of Biostatistics. What I really enjoy about the Master of Biostatistics, it's the way that we get to work with health professionals, clinicians, laboratory scientists, working with the clinical and population health data. But at the same time, we've got a real love for mathematics and data analysis and answering those key questions. Next, thanks. So just to give a little bit of what happens when you're a biostatistician, what does this vocation bring for you? And one of my favorite quotes is, you can work anywhere in the world. In fact, I had the great privilege of working for 4 years in Thailand and Vietnam, traveling between 3 locations in Bangkok, up on the Thai-Myanmar border in a refugee site. So you can see me walking across a precarious bridge there to go visit patients, and also in Ho Chi Minh City. Professor John Carlin, one of the other subject coordinators who teaches into the course, loves the variety of the topics and the challenges that that's brought him when he's been his 20+ year career at the Royal Children's Hospital. Lyle Gurran loves working in real world problems. He does a lot in allergy area. And even the chief economist of the Google Corporation highlights this as a hugely important skill for the next decades going forward. Next slide, thanks. So what does a Master of Biostatistics entail? Well, it's a full-time degree. It takes 1.5 years or 3 years if you're doing it part-time. What I think is one of the really great things about this course, it's a hybrid of face-to-face and online teaching. So some of the subjects are delivered on campus where you get to know the lecturers very well and meet the cohort group. And there's also many subjects available online. And with the current COVID-19 situation, obviously we've transformed a lot of our face-to-face teaching online with wonderful videos that have been developed over this last few weeks. So those will still be available once we can return to campus and meet with the students. Our elective subjects are not just delivered by us at the University of Melbourne, but also by other universities across Australia, because we're part of the Biostatistics Collaboration of Australia, which means you get access to national leaders and experts in that field, and also opens up even more career opportunities than those that are offered by us at the University of Melbourne. And the course has a real emphasis on real health data sets and communication of statistical methods. We're setting you up so you can get out there in the workplace and meet with a clinician, meet with a policymaker, meet with a laboratory scientist, and be able to explain what we're trying to do. Why are we applying this method? How is it best to answer their question? Next slide, please. So is biostatistics for you? That's a question. Obviously, you've come along this to find out if it is. Well, I suppose it is. Do you enjoy working with data? Do you like to do some programming? But in doing that, you really want to do it to answer real world problems. So you want to transform clinical and population health research. I often joke with people that maybe deep down I sort of did want to be a clinical doctor, but my love of mathematics was far greater. And here I feel I get the best of both worlds. Some of the problems we work on typically is we decide which drug is best to use in clinical practice. At the moment, I'm working on a study where we're investigating treatments for COVID-19 that we've had to get up and running within just a few weeks. I've also previously worked on where we evaluated the impact of plain packaging and how much that reduced teenage smoking. And more recently in the press, you would have seen our Prime Minister with graphs showing how our R0, that's the number of new infections estimated from a single case for COVID-19, has changed with time, and how what different policies of physical distancing, shutting of schools has influenced on that. And that was actually work done by one of the subject coordinators in this course. Next slide, thanks. So what selection, how do we select you to go into this course? Well, it's very broad. You can have an undergraduate degree in many different discipline areas. And there are just two key eligibility criteria. You need to have a bachelor degree with a mark of at least 70%, that's your weighted average mark, and also completion of a mathematics subject at tertiary level, just one of these. So these are offered in the Bachelor of Biomedicine or the Bachelor of Science, University of Melbourne, but also are offered in many other courses internationally and nationally. Next slide, thanks. The course structure is spread over 3 semesters if you're studying it full-time. There are 4 core subjects in the first semester. Statistical computing subject, for example, teaches the packages Stata and R is the software that's being used for a lot of the modelling done for the COVID-19. In semester 2, there are 2 further core subjects, but then there are a huge number of electives to choose from. And I think the key thing is in the final semester, and that is the research project. This is when you really gain that internship, that real world experience. And you have one of us as your supervisors, but also a content area expert that might be a pediatrician, a neurologist, a psychologist, depending on the project. Next slide, thanks. So here you're just an array of the elective subjects, although I'm also quite flexible in opening up to other electives that are available at University of Melbourne upon discussion of which direction you'd like to go. But you can see already here that there's a large number, 8, that are offered online, so there's huge flexibility, but also another 6 or 7 that are offered on campus. And they range enormously to allow you to have graduate in different directions. Some students are very interested in more the bioinformatics. Some students are more interested in the computational side or machine learning, data science. Others are interested in getting into infectious disease modeling. Others are interested in becoming clinical trials experts. And you work with me in a meeting to help tailor the course that best suits you. Next slide, thanks. Just to give you some examples of the biostatistics research projects on offer, so we have collaborators across many of the hospitals and institutes throughout Melbourne, and we tee up each of you with a content area that you're interested in and also maybe the methodology. So just this semester, we've got the oral presentations coming up next week for a number of our students. One of the students is collaborating with people at the Bio 21, where they're evaluating the impact of indoor residual spraying on health outcomes in a study that these people have led in Ghana. At the Doherty Institute, a student is looking at how non-compliance influences the spread of Ebola. We've got someone down now working at the Children's Hospital looking at how maternal anxiety influences child language. At the Cancer Council of Victoria, we've looked at how they do the automation of projections of cancer incidence and mortality. We have students at other projects there that you can see listed too. Next slide, thanks. There's also, as well as the Master of Biostatistics, there's a graduate diploma in biostatistics that is just a one-year course. This is still vocational and will set you up to go into a biostatistics position, as you'll hear from Sam soon. The only difference is it doesn't offer the research project and won't give you the pathway into a PhD. However, we've often had a number of students who start in the graduate diploma of biostatistics, but then partway through can easily transfer and change this to the master's degree program if wished. Next slide, thanks. So a little bit about different career pathways, and I would like to say that I'm very proud that many of my previous students, I have actually found employment in many of these different places. Some have gone on to be a consultant biostatistician at a hospital. So we've got a number working out at different Western Health and Northern Health hospitals. We have others that have gone into a clinical trial centre. I can think of one at the moment that's down at the Children's Trial Centre. Some biostatisticians have gone into work with big data, much more into the genomics area. In fact, at the moment, many of my graduates are actually being called in, and even current students, to work at the Department of Health, Human Health Services, because they did a call out to us to help us get many graduates to work on the COVID-19 tracing of cases. And other students decide they love it so much that they're not ready yet to go into the workplace, but they want to learn to delve deeper into the methodology and do a PhD in biostatistics. Next slide, thanks. So just a little bit about my own career. So as I said, I started out doing my Bachelor of Science at the University of Melbourne back in the late 80s. And then went over to Cambridge to do a master's degree. And then following that, I went to St. Thomas's Hospital in London, which I often call my apprenticeship, where I worked on lots of statistical problems and taught all the first-year medical students for 3 years. I then ventured out to Thailand and Vietnam for 4 years. You can see, obviously, there's me working in a refugee camp. Obviously, laptops have changed a lot from that old green slide there. From there, I moved to the north of Scotland, where I got to work a lot in primary care research, so much more focused on prevention, and then moved back to Australia and worked for the World Health Organization, the Cancer Council, before going full circle and returning to the University of Melbourne. I've been here now for coming up to 16 years, and I'm now also the Deputy Head of the Melbourne School of Population and Global Health. Next slide, thanks. Oh, there's just some pictures of me in Southeast Asia. Thanks. So just to show a little bit more about some people you might have seen in the news. So some of you probably recognize James McCaw. He's been on lots of TV shows and everything. So his background's physics and he works in infectious disease modeling. But a lot of the model validation and work that they've done on showing how much we're flattening the curve and what policies also uses a lot of statistics. And I've got a picture there of Price, who's been doing the work behind the scenes. and he lectures our course on Introduction to Statistical Computing as well. Also, with James McCall, he and I were awarded the Eureka Prize a few years ago for our research of mathematical and statistical modelling into drug-resistant malaria. Unfortunately, my husband was away that evening, so I needed to stay home with the children, but still we had a lovely celebration when James returned. Next slide, thanks. So now I'd like to pass over to the students who have been our recent graduates, and we'll give you some insights into their experience with the Master of Biostatistics. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. That is really insightful. I see that we have a few questions already coming through. This is really amazing. I guess what we might do now is continue the webinar with our alumni, Nif, Lizzie, and Sam, introducing themselves and share their journey at Master of Biostatistics and Graduate Diploma of Biostatistics. Now, we start off with Nif. I am going to hand over to you soon, Nif.
Hi, everyone.
Over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter. So I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Neve Ma. I'm a recent graduate from the Master of Biostatistics program. I graduated at the end of last year. Currently, my position, I'm working as a research assistant at the Peter Doherty Institute for Infection and Immunity. And I do a lot of work in statistical analyses there. So it's an institute of over 800 researchers, and I'm responsible for providing any assistance they may need. So this could range from planning of experiments, planning of epidemiological studies, up until the analysis and interpretation and presentation of results. So it's a really varied, interesting role. We might move on to the next slide. Thank you. So my background was in laboratory-based medicine. So I was trained as a biochemist and microbiologist, and I worked in a diagnostics lab at Austin Hospital for a number of years. After a couple of years, I kind of missed the university experience. I wanted to learn a bit more, and I had a real keen interest in looking at infectious disease and epidemiology. So in my searches, I stumbled upon the Master of Biostatistics program, like probably many of you have, and I found it really interesting, really applicable, and I saw the opportunity to learn a lot of new skills that would be very applicable, not just in research, but also just more broadly in this new data-driven society we live in. So I saw a real great opportunity for a change in career direction and a lot of new opportunities there. We might move on to the next one, thanks. So this is just a couple of these subjects that I really enjoyed as part of the program. Of the core subjects, I loved getting a real handle on the theory behind statistics in the probability and distribution theory class. So that was an online subject. It was quite flexible. I could work it around my work schedule, and I had a lot of flexibility there, which was wonderful. In addition to that, I had my epidemiology class, which gave me a real insight into the scope of epidemiology. So it's a huge field with many different areas, covers everything from infectious disease to cancer to obesity. I had no idea it was that big, so it was great to finally learn a little bit about that. And of course, linear regression is the class taught by Julie. It was my first foray into trying to do an analysis myself using real data. And it was very challenging and really wonderful. Julie was a fantastic teacher and managed to make everything really simple and easy to understand for us newbies. In terms of electives, there is a huge variety available. I think it's got a lot, the list has gotten a lot longer since I've taken any electives, but even when I was looking at it, it was massive. So as you can see here, I've had quite a variety of different electives. Infectious disease modelling was great, very much in my line of interest. And I also had the opportunity working with Julie to take a class outside the listed electives, Introduction to Programming, and that allowed me to learn another programming language and add another string to my bow, another ability I could take going forward. We might move on to the next slide, please. So this is just some personal highlights from my experience in the degree. Of course, it was extremely flexible in terms of having both face-to-face and online subjects. Sometimes you do need that one-on-one interaction with a tutor or lecturer to get your head around a concept, particularly if it's a difficult class. So that was great to have that chance. In addition to that, you had the huge number of electives available, which was wonderful. And everyone who I took the Master of Biostatistics program with took their learning in a different direction. So it was very individual for each student. Probably the highlight was the chance to get some hands-on experience. So of course, with the capstone project, that was a great chance to finally tie in all the concepts we'd learned over the various subjects, bring them all together, and produce a final piece of work which you could be very proud of and hopefully get published in a research journal going forward. In addition to that, I also had some experience as a casual research assistant, and I did some tutoring for the Master of Public Health, their linear and logistic regression class, and that's just a photo of me with the other tutors from that class. Okay, we might move on to the last slide. So overall, this is the main, these are the main things that I took out of the program. I learned a lot, much more than I ever thought I would, about statistical methods and inference. I managed to get a chance to learn a number of different programming languages. So as Julie mentioned, Stata and R, and I branched out to learn some Python on myself as well. And of course, I think the real benefit to taking the Master of Biostats is getting the hands-on application of all these concepts that you learn and applying them to real-world examples to solve problems and to make a real change in the world. So I would encourage anyone who has even a slight interest to have a look into the Master of Biostats program and see if it's for them, because I definitely, it's definitely changed the course of my life. So I would recommend it to anyone who thinks it could do the same for them. Okay, thank you. I might hand back to Peter now for the next student.
Amazing. Thanks, Nif. I guess our next alumni is Lizzie. She who really fell in love with research and continue pursuing her PhD, and I'm currently a tutor in biostatistics. So over to you, Lizzie.
Yes, hi. Thanks for that introduction. As Peter said, my name is Lizzie Korovar. I did the Master of Biostats. I graduated in 2018. And I thought I'd take you sort of through my journey of the Master of Biostats, because I've ended up loving it so much. I am a PhD student. I'm continuing in research as much as I can. I also have a research assistant position. I'm doing a PhD and research assistant work at Monash. But I try and stay in touch with Uni Melbourne as much as I can with tutoring and helping out with tutorials and practical classes, and as much as I can, really. Yeah, so I guess to start off with, I'll say that I thoroughly loved the Masters from start to finish. So despite coming from a non-stats background, before the Masters, I had just shy of negligible statistics training. I knew that I loved maths in high school, and it was one of my favourite and best subjects. I knew that I had enjoyed every chance that I'd gotten since high school to get in touch with maths. But the undergrad that I did was in microbiology, and it was very lab-based and didn't really focus on the analysis at all. We had very little exposure to how and why you analyse your data to get your final result and conclusion. So while writing up my analysis section of my honours thesis, I could see the potential for much greater understanding. And then at the end of the degree, when I was looking for what was next, I had a friend who, she really piqued my interest in the Masters of Public Health. And I found this interesting. And though I wasn't interested or as interested in the policy side of public health, I really was in the analysis side in that space. And so when I saw the Masters of Biostats, I thought to myself that it really did meet all the criteria. I remember flicking through the handbook and the list of subjects that Julie put up before. I remember flicking through those and planning out my course before I'd even heard if I'd got into the degree. Everything sounded amazing, and I definitely felt that being spoilt for choice was the kind of problem that I really wanted to have. So once in the Masters, I felt quite at home. So I found the cohort to be fantastic. Compared to undergrad and even some other master's courses, the Master of Biostats was much smaller, and that made it easier to get to know each other as we moved from class to class together. The biggest thing though was that everyone was there because they wanted to be there. They found it all fascinating. They wanted to talk about it and discuss the content. And I think that in itself is a really motivating environment to be in. And so back in the day, we would, and we still do, catch up for coffee and just chat about the cool things that we're learning, the things that we would read about, things in the media, for example, that we felt we now had a greater understanding of and we could keep up with. A great example of that is the current epidemic. And had we not been working from home during this time, it's exactly the sort of thing that we would catch up together and chat about over coffee, feeling like that we understand things at a deeper level. Another highlight is that the lecturers and coordinators, as you've seen from Julie, you can tell when they teach that this is their passion and that they want you to understand things not just for assessments, but also the big picture and where all the things that you're learning fit into research and industry and everything, really. At the same time, though, I found the course quite challenging, but saying that I mean challenging in a good way. We were required to think and to problem solve, and it's not the sort of course that you can ignore for 11 weeks and cram it all in the night before an assignment, but they made sure that as students, you understood the whole way through, like you could see the point of the challenges, you could see why you were doing what you were doing. And you could definitely tell that effort had been made to make the assignments and examples relevant and the sorts of things that, like the skills that you learned in working through the problems would be applicable in the future. The problems that you tackle in assignments, they mirror the types of problems that you come up against in the real world, which is really refreshing. It definitely helps keeping you engaged with what you're learning. And so while it was challenging and required effort, it was really rewarding to look back at the problems that you'd worked through. Another highlight for me was that they offered the chance to get involved in research. I knew from honours that I really enjoyed it. And it was great to see with the research projects that Neve mentioned, the capstones, it was the stats side of research. So that was great. And from there, I was able to continue on with some of my research projects in a professional research assistant role. And the Masters is where I got in touch with my current PhD supervisor. And I'm now coming to the end of my first year of my PhD at Monash. And as I mentioned earlier, I also have a research assistant position there too, looking into the methodology of cluster randomized trials, and my PhD is in meta-analysis of a particular study design called an interrupted time series. And I remember coming into the degree at the start, I wouldn't have known what any of those words mean, but I feel great and it's so much fun and you have the confidence to kind of talk about these things. Yeah, so I feel like I use what I learned in the course every single day, and without trying to sound too into it, it really was one of the best decisions I could have made for myself. It was fantastic. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Lizzie.
My pleasure.
So I guess, thank you again. Last but not least, we are going to have Sam. Sam is a research assistant in biostats. I guess the floor is yours, Sam.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for that, Peter. Yes, like Peter said, my name's Sam, and I'm a research assistant in biostats at the University of Melbourne. So I loved it so much that I haven't left, and I think I might go back and study more at this rate. Can I get next slide, please, Peter? Or 2 slides. So my pathway, I certainly didn't start off knowing that I was going to end up doing stats at all. I started off doing a Bachelor of Science, and I majored in mechanical engineering. But unfortunately, after I completed that, I kind of figured out that it wasn't really for me. But I knew I wanted a science career and maybe something more directly involved in helping people. I took a year off and thought about it, did a bit of soul searching, and discovered the Master of Public Health, which to me seemed like a nice crossover of a lot of things that I was interested in. During this course, I discovered that I really liked epidemiology. But one thing that I wish the course had more of, while I loved it, I didn't feel as though they went in depth enough into the stats side of things. So I left that course with a bit of a hunger to learn more, and so I decided to do the grad dip in biostats. So the grad dip, like Julie said earlier, it's similar to the masters in the sense that it has all the same core subjects, but you get a few less electives and you don't do a research project. So I didn't want to do a research project just because I'd already done one in my MPH and didn't feel the need to do another one. So I really did the grad dip to further my MPH and further my interest in epidemiology, seeing as epi and biostats go kind of hand in hand. And also because the grad dip and the Master of Biostats, I was told, and I think I've since experienced, they're both very employable. So you get a lot of people graduating from the Master of Public Health. My cohort was a few hundred people large. But the Master of Biostats and the grad dip are much smaller, I think. People, often avoid stats because they think it's hard, and that means there's a lot of jobs in it. And it's not that hard, and it's really enjoyable. Next slide, please. So my experience at the uni, I was there for 6 years, so I obviously loved it. As far as the course itself goes, the subjects are taught by experts in their field, so you get wonderful professors like Julie herself, or John Carlin, who's head of biostats down at the Murdoch Children's and is an expert on Bayesian stats. So you just know you're getting a world-class stats education throughout. Both the Master of Biostats and the grad dip are accredited with the Statistical Society of Australia, and it's possible to start working as a biostatistician straight away, which is what I did. So that's a big perk for both of them. Like Neve touched on, there's a mixture of in-person and online subjects. And like it's been mentioned, the in-person subjects, the class sizes are really quite small, which is great. So in most of my classes, there were only 20 or 30 people, and that means you get to know your lecturers personally, and it has much more of a classroom feel than big undergrad lectures that I was used to. So it's really great for engagement. You feel much more involved, and also really useful to know your lecturers personally when you need to ask questions for the difficult material that you might encounter. There are also some online subjects. Before I'd done the grad dip, I had never done an online subject, and I was quite hesitant about them. But the ones I did were all run through BCA, the Biostats Collaboration of Australia, and they're all excellent. They put in so much effort to make them accessible and for them to run smoothly. The materials are great. There's things like online forums for you to ask questions, and they really are amazing. So as far as the uni goes as well, outside of the course, there's loads going on. So that's a picture there of the campus, if anyone listening has never seen it. So it's right next to the CBD. It's a beautiful campus itself, and there's loads going on just in it and right next to it. It's great. There's loads of opportunities for things like sports. I played futsal and tennis most years when I was there at the uni. Clubs and societies, loads of people do those things, and they always host events and things. So you can have a really fun time both in and out of the course. And that's a photo there from Pronto Pizza, which is a pizza place at Union House, and it is absolutely top tier pizza, and you won't get that anywhere else. So that's something really to bear in mind when you're choosing courses in unis. Next slide, please, Peter. So my job at the moment is as a research assistant in biostats at the uni. So I work in the biostats unit there, and I conduct analyses for researchers from the Centre of Health, Exercise and Sports Medicine. So a lot of the stuff that I work on is things like knee osteoarthritis, as shown there, and things like low back pain. So kind of physiotherapy issues, and that's something that I never knew anything about, and arguably still don't. That's the beauty of stats, in that you can kind of, get a taste for a lot of different areas if you just understand the stats. So while I'm doing this year, next year it might be completely different. I think that's really exciting. I work on many different projects, including a lot of randomized control trials, which I find really exciting, because you're kind of getting the strongest possible answer to questions that people don't know. And you get lots of publications being a statistician as well. So I only work this particular job 2 days a week, and I only started a few months ago. But already I have about 4 or 5 publications in progress, which is great for an early career researcher like myself. And there's just loads of opportunities to kind of expand yourself and get publications. The grad dip obviously directly prepared me for this. So to recognize qualifications, so employers know about it, same as Master of Biostats, obviously. You get real world skills as well. So I think unlike some other subjects I've done in my undergrad, what I found when I went into the workforce is that a lot of stuff that I learned during the grad dip, I actually directly use in my job, which is just encouraging to know that you're learning really relevant material and you will use it. And also during the grad dip, you get to know people in the field. So the lecturers that teach the subjects, they're always people working in the field, and you might end up working alongside them one day. So you know, it pays to be nice to your lecturers and your classmates. So you might be working alongside them soon. That's all. Thank you, Peter.
Well, thank you, Sam. I love Frontal Pizza too. And FYI, this is not endorsed by them, by the way. Thank you, Sam. And again, also thank you to Lizzie, Neve, and Julie for all this insightful informations. I'm pretty sure that all of us would actually, get a lot of information from there. So I guess we have some time left for the Q&A sessions. We do receive a lot of questions from our audiences. So I'm going to put those questions to our panel members. Anyone is welcome to join the conversation at any time. So I guess we will start off with the first questions. So let's see. I guess the first question is, what major do I need to take in my current undergraduate, or it could be postgraduate as well, I guess, if I intend to do biostatistics? Anyone?
Maybe I'll take
yeah.
that one.
Yes, sure.
So you can do any major. It's very flexible, but what you do need to have done is at least one mathematics subject in the degree and received a grade above 65% for that. It's also, if you haven't done a tertiary level mathematics subjects in your degree, it's still worth applying, because sometimes I realize that students have recently done maths though at a very high level in year 12, and so I do offer a test to overcome that requirement, and if they do well in that test, which just is done online, it takes a couple of hours, they can still become on the course.
Oh, thank you for that. So did you well, I guess I'm just going to put this question for the alumni here. Did you have any plan prior your biostatistics program, before taking biostatistics program, and how did you prepare for it?
I can address that first, if you don't mind.
Yes.
So yeah, so I kind of you apply for me personally, I applied the year before, and then I found out I got in late December, and I knew I was starting in February. So I did spend a bit of time on that summer brushing up on some of the background mathematics, because I hadn't done it in quite a while. I think quite a few of the people I was in classes with tended to be a bit overwhelmed at the start by the mathematics, but I think if you work through it slowly and you slowly get through the first couple of classes, it all turns around and you eventually have that moment of realization where it's like, oh, it all clicks now. So I would recommend doing some prior study if you can beforehand, but absolutely not necessary either, because you can just spend a little extra time in your classes and it will come together for you.
Yeah,
I think that
excellent.
Oh yeah, you go first, Sam.
I'll just adding on that. I think that all the courses are really good in that they build kind of from the ground up. So yeah, it definitely helps to have a bit of a maths background, but I'd forgotten a lot of maths before I started, and it kind of comes back to you to get taught from the ground up. So you'll be okay.
Yeah, I think I hadn't done any maths in about 5 years before I took the class, and I did a couple of weeks of practice beforehand, and I was still fine. So I think, yeah, don't feel too overwhelmed by that.
Yeah, I was one of the examples that Julie gave where I hadn't done the tertiary maths. So the closest exposure to maths that I'd had was in year 12. So I did do the test and got through, which yay. But the same sort of thing. So, the first few weeks are quite intense because there's a lot of new things coming at you, but the notes are good, the teachers are good. And if you work through what you've been given, then you get there. So stick with it.
Yeah, and I think because of the cohort being a cohort of just, 30 students and that cohort experience, we often have sort of two groups, but I think they come together very nicely. So we have some who have come from background where their degree is a bit more diverse in maybe the health sciences or other areas, and have done a little bit less maths, but have had a bit more closer to the lot of the content area we work with. And then we have others that maybe have come from more mathematical background, but are learning a bit more of how to interpret and communicate that with the health content area. And it's lovely to watch within a few weeks, the little way they sit at the tables starts to mix a bit. And you see some of the people with biomedical backgrounds explaining some of the problems in terms of why it's important in the question, and some of the people with more mathematical backgrounds helping with a little bit of the algebra. And I think that's why I like that the student cohort is a bit more diverse to bring those two aspects.
So I guess in terms of submitting an application, so whether it's for graduate diploma or Master of Biostatistics, do they need an advanced computer skills or advanced mathematics skills? Any advice, maybe from Julie?
Yeah, no, so they just need to have completed one tertiary level mathematics subject in the undergraduate degree, or as I said, do apply, and I'm the person who reviews the applications, every single one each year. So then, as I said, in Lizzie's example where I could see she had completed some high level year 12 maths, I offered the test. And then the computational skills, the very first semester you learn a subject called Introduction to Statistical Computing. We teach two packages. We start with the package that we think is a little bit more user-friendly for the first 4 weeks before moving into the R software, which is a little bit more of a program-orientated language. And I think all the three alumni will agree, Emily and David, who teach that, do step it through very carefully, assuming no prior knowledge to that, to build up your skill set.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was one of my favorite subjects, and yeah, again, really kind of guided you through it, and I felt very comfortable at the end. And I'd never used R before, and only a tiny bit of data, and by the end of it you feel very comfortable using both. So yeah, it's a great subject.
Yeah, thank you, Julie, for the clarifications. I have this one question. I'm not exactly sure. All right, someone is actually asking, and this is from Lachlan actually, what is the differences, I guess, in terms of the learning outcome and job opportunities between our Master of Biostatistics versus Master of Statistics, Applied Statistics? I don't think we actually have Master of Statistics in the bracket Applied Statistics. So I think it might be a program, a course from other university. Julie, are you familiar with the Master of Statistics? Have you heard it before?
There are Masters of Statistics typically in School of Mathematics and Statistics at different universities. I would say that's usually more theoretical, and for statisticians that are going to potentially develop the theory methods, work much more intensely in the probability area. For a Master of Applied Statistics, which I know other universities do offer, that will have some crossover and aspects with this degree. But because it's trying to cover lots of areas, it won't really train you up as well for going into a position of a biostatistician. So it might not cover clinical trials, it might not cover causal methods, it might not cover the infectious diseases area. Yep. So because it's broader, it probably is a bit more generic, but doesn't get down into the typical areas that you will face in your very first job as a biostatistician.
I guess it makes sense then. One more question here from Mr. Fu. I think I think he's an international student probably. He's interested in graduate diploma in biostatistics. Is the minimum requirement and the minimum WAM requirement, is it still 70%?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It has the same entry requirements because essentially you're doing the same course except not a research project, and you're limited to only 2 electives. But we do have the same requirements so that you're fully prepared and for the subjects and have a good result. But also both degrees are vocational and offer you to go into those positions. So.
Okay. I'll move on to the next questions. I say that would the work experience considered more favorable? Would you consider work experience when you're actually assessing for CSP places?
Yep. So I do the CSP places. So I rank them initially on the last, the highest academic result they've got. So if it's their bachelor degree or honours in that. And then I also assign some points considering on some years of work experience that is related to the degree.
Thank you, Julie. I guess this is one of the questions that would probably interest most people, I would say. What are my job prospects after completing biostatistics, either graduate diploma or Master of Biostatistics? Anyone want to comment?
Well, maybe let's ask the alumni first because they've all got some jobs from it.
So I might kick us off. I think there's heaps of job opportunity out there for someone with a grad dip in biostats or a master's in biostats. I personally was applying for jobs before I've even finished and was getting them. So I think there's a lot of opportunity out there with the skills that you learn. In my cohort, I know everyone who I'm in contact with has gotten some kind of work, whether it be a casual part-time position to suit their lifestyle or a more full-time position like I do. Everyone has secured some kind of biostatistical work. So I think the job prospects are particularly great for biostats.
Yeah, I agree. I think
No, you go.
Okay. I think like Julie said as well at the start with some of those quotes, especially the one from Google, stats jobs just seem to be the future. Like almost every industry in science needs some sort of stats done. And yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of people avoid stats, which is their own problem. But yeah, you get much fewer people going through stats degrees than a lot of other degrees, and there seem to be a lot of jobs around. All my friends who graduated have had no problem at all finding jobs afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. And I think another thing to say is that, like, as a part of the masters, you do get to know people. Your lecturers are there. With the research projects, you get in touch with people like in the applied area where you're going to use your biostats work. And so just by being involved in those different things, you get to know people. And so when I came out of my master's from the research projects, I helped out quite a few different groups with little jobs. And that can go from anywhere between applying like really like difficult methods, but also if just little bits of programming. So there's lots of skills that you accumulate through the degree that can be applied to quite a lot of jobs. And as Neve said, some of those are part-time, some of them are casual, so like tutoring and things like that, to full-time work. And quite a lot of people that I know, they've gone into sort of research, PhDs as well. Don't discount those, they're fun. And consulting as well. Yeah, there's lots of things out there.
And what I say to most when they're graduating, in fact, Sam, we had a chat at the graduation breakfast, and I said to he and Alex, please send me your CVs, because I get tapped on the shoulder for jobs all the time. And then I think within a week or two, Sam, I was in touch with a job offer.
Yeah,
and I've ran out of my recent graduates that we've just offered and got working, a student who's still enrolled and just finishing up this semester, but we had urgent work for 2 large trials, one in Bangladesh and one in Malawi, and they're starting to work on that for us in June. So I do feel pretty confident that most graduates I have either employed myself or given them jobs through other people that have asked me for a biostatistician.
Yeah, make friends with Julie. That's the moral of that
story. Would it be taboo to ask what the salary would be, like the starting salary for the graduate?
No, it's not taboo at all. It's typically it's a level A or a level B. So a level A coming out of the graduate diploma or the master's, and it's your first job without work experience, would be a level A, which is around about $70,000 to $80,000 a year, I think. And some who might have had experience or done things before the masters might go into a level B, would be around the $80,000 to $90,000. It's much better than my neighbour's. Her son's gone in to be a lawyer, started lower than that. So I think he's chosen the wrong career, to be honest.
It's pretty good starting salary, I would say.
Yeah, and I will mention as well the tutoring opportunities. If you do happen to pick those up after your degree or as you're doing a PhD, you do get paid really well hourly for those as well.
Yeah,
I think it's around $45 an hour or something like that.
Well, that's just for marking and practicals, but for tutoring, it's $100 an hour for running the tute.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Julian, and all the alumni. The next question we have is from Adam Drenzler. As a working clinician, is considering to take Master of Biostatistics. So he's concerned about the face-to-face requirement of the University of Melbourne versus the other BCA consortium universities, which are all online. What are your thoughts on this?
Yep, so sure, obviously we're a partner of the BCA, and the other universities offer a fully online course, but you can only do that part-time, so you can't accelerate. But clearly if you're working, your part-time option is maybe the better option for you. The only thing I would say that's maybe we have just, converted a lot of our subjects to have online or on-campus versions, and going forward we'll be offering all those video resources that we've made, so there will be flexibility for our usual face-to-face subjects. But I also think we've had quite a few clinicians do this course, and I think they still liked that they would come to the campus. A lot of our face-to-face subjects are just taught sort of 3 to 5 on a Tuesday, so they've worked their shifts around that, because I think they've still enjoyed having that contact and meeting the lecturers and meeting the other students and developing those connections.
I would agree, as someone who's done both online and in-person subjects. Yes, the online is great for that flexibility, but there is a lot of worth in the face-to-face subjects as well, not just in meeting your lecturers and meeting potential future employers and things like that, but also in getting some, making connections with your classmates, helping them out, them helping you out, and you get a broader understanding of the material when you're all working together on something. So I think there's benefits in both, but I can understand the need to have that flexibility too.
Thank you all. I guess we move on to the next question. This is something to do with the work experience, I guess. So is there a work placement or internship in the program? I guess someone was actually asking whether they would get some kind of experience before they actually jump into the work area, I guess.
So that's really I would say the research project is pretty much like an internship. All the research projects are with collaborators of ours, and some of them even require that you have to go and work and sit at their place because of even data access issues. So I know we've had students in the past who have gone down and they sit 1 day or 2 days a week at the Royal Children's Hospital working with the collaborators there on the data. My student this semester who's working on the Ghanaian project actually sits with the malaria lab group at Bio21. They've given her own desk. She's got a pass. She's very much goes to the group meetings, which obviously is on Zoom at the moment, but gets to actually feel part of a team. So even though they're not called officially internships, I would say just the nature of the research projects and the fact that you're working on data at the Cancer Council or Ambulance Victoria or whichever hospital, you do go to those sites, and in many cases you have a desk and you're part of that team.
Thank you, Julie.
And often many get a job from that group. You know, they go on and then get a job with that group from that experience.
One question from Kelsey Downs. This is a really specific question. Is research methods A and B in psychology statistics undergraduate considered mathematics?
No, it's not. It probably won't cover the algebra and calculus that we're looking for, but Kelsey, we've had other people apply with a similar background, and for those I do offer the test, and to be honest, most do very well in this test and then come on the course, and then they might say, could you suggest some materials or things just for me to brush up in on January and February, because it's been a while since, you know, I've done my calculus and that, and I just give some advice on some nice little online materials that they can use.
Thanks again, Julie. I guess for a full-time student who I guess is doing either graduate diploma or master, what's the contact hours, I guess, in face-to-face per week? How about online classes per week?
So for semester 1, there are 3 face-to-face subjects and just 1 online. That's the one that's the most packed in terms of face-to-face. And it would be, it's probably about 7 hours a week in terms of the practicals, lectures and tutorials. In semester 2, there's only 2 face-to-face, so that would be about 4 to 5 hours a week, and you can then pick 2 electives that are online. And then in the 3rd semester, the following year, you could do a research project and all online electives and only have to be there when you got meetings with your collaborators about the project.
Sounds good. Let's see. Yeah, we have a question from student asking, well, I guess this is more for our alumni. Your typical day as a biostatistician. And I guess this is the interesting question is, what do you like and not so like, I guess?
All right, I'll go
Anyone want to jump in?
So my typical day might involve a Skype call. At the moment, everything's online, so my typical day at the moment may not be. Most of my work so far has been during COVID, so it might not be typical normally. But at the moment, it might start with something like a Skype call with someone who I'm working on a project with. They might discuss with me kind of what they're doing, what they want done. And then, you know, I'll think about the stats. I will, I'll be on my computer doing the stats or researching what to do. Then we'll be helping write manuscripts as well once the stats are done. And yeah, I think what I like about it is you're the first person to kind of find things out. So, you know, they spent, you know, sometimes years on randomized control trials that you're analyzing, and you get to see the data first, which I find exciting. And I guess what I don't like at the moment, probably largely due to COVID though, is just obviously I can't see anyone at the moment. So at the moment I don't feel like I'm in a team, but I think that may all change once we go back. So yeah, I think it's a really exciting thing to do.
I could go next if you don't mind, Lizzie.
Go for it.
Sure. So I work at the Peter Doherty Institute. So my typical day pre-COVID was I'd come in, the first thing I'd do is make a coffee. I would sit down and I'd plan out my day. So I'd have like maybe half an hour just to sort through emails, to make a to-do list and prioritize. So my particular role involves juggling a lot of different projects. So I often have to prioritize based on how urgent things are, the deadlines for certain projects. Does my input is it needed in order to progress? So there's a lot of time management involved. Once I've sorted myself out, I'm typically working on those projects, which is a lot of sitting at your computer, typing away, researching methods to deal with things, trying to solve programming problems, which crops up a lot. In addition to that, you also need to meet with people. So you might meet with them to discuss a statistical analysis plan for a new project they're presenting. You might meet with them to discuss an ongoing project, present results, and help them with the interpretation of that. Or you might be meeting them to for another purpose. Say they have something planned in the future and they're like, oh, I want to get some input on you from this stage. So it's really good that a biostatistician is brought in at the start so that we can advise throughout the whole process. In addition to that, we also have teaching commitments. So I'm doing a little bit of teaching this semester. It's online, but typically it would be a nice break to go across and stand in front of a class and help out students who are learning things that are a lot very similar to what I've done, and it really does help consolidate what I know too. What I like the most is that feeling when you finish an analysis and all the loose ends are tied up and you've got your final analysis script and it's all done and dusted, and you get to bring that to your supervisor and say, look, I'm finished. And it's a great feeling to have completed a project in that way. Probably the most challenging thing, aside from the COVID stuff, is juggling of time. So I find time management is quite difficult on occasion because you have multiple commitments at once, particularly in a role like mine. But yeah, it's definitely helps you learn how to manage your time too.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll add just briefly onto that. So when I first came out of the degree, I was working on quite a few different projects. And so similar to Neve, it was all about time management. And so you'd break down your day and work for different portions of time on the different projects and things like that. But with the PhD, it's shuffled a little bit. So my typical day, I think working in the office was probably one of the highlights because you'd be sitting around with people who were all working on their different projects. And so you'd sit down and you'd have your list of things to do. So at the moment, we've been working on a systematic review of different methodologies that people are using. And so you're sitting there working through and learning about all the different processes and the different approaches that people take. And then you would take the things that you would learn each week to a meeting with your supervisors, and you'd get to chat about them and explore them. And one of the things that I'm really looking forward to working on is a simulation study. And so managing amongst all of the different systematic review reading that you do, you sort of investigate, you know, how to tackle this bigger problem, a simulation study, all the different parameters that you're going to be looking at and things like that to kind of come up with a neat package of things. And at the same time, squeezing in tutoring and things like that. So definitely time management is a big one. But you get to explore a lot of different ideas. And I think that's probably the biggest highlight for me, is that you can really dig deep and take the time to explore some really interesting things.
Thank you, everyone. I'm quite conscious it's pretty much at the end of this webinar. So I guess I'm going to take the last two questions really quickly, if that's okay. So I guess going back to more like a job prospect questions, the majority of jobs private or public sectors? Maybe anyone can give you a bit of insight on that?
The majority are public sector, I would say. Yeah. with
Public
some
sector?
some in pharmaceutical and some maybe in private hospitals, but in Australia mostly the public sector but if you went to the Northern Hemisphere, maybe you'd also have more opportunities where there's a larger presence of the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, makes sense. I guess the last question would be Meg Tully. She's trying to actually to figure out whether she should actually be working before applying for the course and getting work experience, or she should do the other way around. Any advice maybe from anyone?
Personally, I'd get on and get the course and then you'll get the work experience through your research project and you'll get out to that nice job of 70,000 plus a year. That's but I was someone who churned through my degrees and then got working as a lecturer at 22. So I was ready to get going straight away.
I guess I came from the opposite, where I was in the workforce for a couple of years. It's definitely not a bad thing, but I would also say it might be easier to be a student and have no money for a while rather than go back to that life after you're used to having a bit more money in the pocket.
A good point, Nif. Any last comment from us, Sam, Lizzie?
Well, I can comment on that last question. That I went straight through my degree as well, and I really enjoyed that. I didn't really feel like the kind of work that would give me good experience. Well, it's difficult to say, but I think I really enjoyed getting straight into it and coming out the other side and working in the area that I knew that I would want to work in, rather than working in something else without the degree.
Yeah, and
thank you,
before I did
Lizzie.
this degree, I was just working at a shoe store, so it's definitely a lot more fun doing the degree and getting a job in stats rather than working in hospos or retail beforehand. So I'd also recommend doing the degree as early as possible.
Thank you, guys. I guess this is the end of the webinar. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Nif, Sam, Lizzie, and also to all of you who attend today's webinar. So I guess we may actually have a few questions that we have not been able to answer those questions. Our team will follow up and contact you, or you can actually contact us through the MDHS Facebook. If you're using Facebook, then yes, go on. If you prefer to to have a one-to-one consultation with our team, feel free to contact us. Details will be provided in the follow-up sent tomorrow. I guess thank you all for joining us tonight, and bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.